Hey, welcome back to Bookish, everybody. As you know, we're your virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life, produced monthly by the Southern California News Group in conjunction with the Bay Area News Group. I'm, as always, Sam Dunn, the senior editor of premium content here. And I need, of course, first thing out of my mouth to give a big thanks to our Reader Rewards subscribers for supporting our programs and everything we do. Without you, we would be nothing, darling. Thank you so much. If you are a Reader Reward subscriber attending tonight, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate from Once Upon a Time Bookstore in Montrose, California. Our winner last month was John Hunter. John, if you're out there, we hope you're enjoying your books. Next up, I just moved my screen, so now I can't see what I was about to say. You can tell I'm a professional here. All right. What I needed to tell you was, if you're not a subscriber yet, why are you not a subscriber? In Southern California, go to scng.com/subscribe to find your local paper. In the Bay Area, go to bayareanewsgroup.com/reader services. Please become a stakeholder in local journalism. It really matters. Also, if you've missed our past programs, go to scng.com/virtual programs and check those out. And while you're at it, check out our cool Bookish swag. Great for gifts. The holidays are right around the corner. All right, so tonight, the program was pre-recorded, so there's not going to be an opportunity for live author questions. But please, if you have questions for me, use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar, and we'll talk about it between episodes. And of course, if you want to add a comment, use the chat feature found on your screen as well. And as always, you won't miss anything because a link is going to be sent to you after the show. And it's always also posted on scng.com/virtual events, as well as on YouTube. So our interviews tonight. They're with two luminous but very different authors who use personal experiences to inspire their writing with, as you'll see, distinctly different results. First up, we have Moon Unit Zappa. If you're a Gen Xer, you know immediately who this is, but if you're not, well, let's review. The 56-year-old Angelino is many things: a writer, actor, mother, and yoga teacher who also happens to be the daughter of avant-garde musician and rock and roll Hall of Famer Frank Zappa. And she was the voice of his only top 40 commercial hit, Valley Girl. She's out with her second book after a 20-year publishing hiatus, a memoir titled Earth to Moon about growing up Zappa. Let's take a listen to what she had to say. Let me begin by saying okay, so it's been 20 some odd years between books, Moon. What's going on here?
Well, I raised a human. I also have a very hermit-like personality. I'm a very private person. I was also really traumatized by writing the first book because I put all this time into working on it, like 5 years, and then it came out on the September 11th. So all of that work was just gone in a Pompeii moment. And I knew it wasn't personal, but it was just a shock that I could put that much effort into something and it just be like, poof, gone. And growing up in Los Angeles and in the Hollywood scene, the legend here
Yeah,
is that if you finally do your piece just the way you want to do it, all doors open. And
yeah.
it didn't happen because for whatever reason. And so
Because the whole,
because the world changed, because
the
the
world,
world,
because everyone was thrown into chaos. And
yeah.
so
And
when
the
did
book,
it?
hmm?
Oh, go ahead. I
And the
was
book
going
was called America the Beautiful, and it
to, it was.
was right. So it was like America had changed, and my book was called. It was a girly summer read, and the world was like, "We're going after people. We don't lay at the beach anymore." So
Well, it was also a book that had some themes that you brought forward in this memoir and made explicit with the girl, the America as hippie royalty, the daughter of a self-made genius. Um, so we can see that there are certain themes that have been picked up now in the memoir.
yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. It's funny because it was just too painful to tell it in a nonfiction way when I was younger. And so I got creative and I thought, oh, I'll just make this a like a hodgepodge of events and then fictionalize things. And throw in some hilarity, and so that was my first attempt, well, at writing a book, but it just at thinking, how do I want to tell a story so that it is palatable, that some of these experiences are not so painful for the reader. And then Gail did many things. Gail being my
Your mother.
yeah, it's hard for me to say the M word. But when she uh, died, and she threw a major curveball, all the adorable, like, it's my family stuff just went away, and I was just stripped bare of it, and I was like, I have to write nonfiction to save my life.
Well, that was my question about why nonfiction and why the move into memoir and what it gave you. And but before we go on, for our readers and for our audience, can you explain a little bit about that curveball? It relates to your siblings, correct?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest. I was born Moon Unit, and Moon because my father gave Gail two choices. I was introduced to my parents as Frank and Gail. They did not want to be known as
As mom and dad,
parents, exactly.
right?
And so Frank gave Gail two choices: Moon or Motorhead. And Motorhead was a member of his band, and Gail selected Moon. And Unit was because I was the firstborn and we became a family unit. And so from the time I was very small, I I really I really lived up to my name, being this thing that was circumnavigating my father,
Well,
the sun.
I was going to say, right? What does the moon do? Reflect the sun,
Yeah,
right?
no light of her own, just
Right.
sunshine, sunshine. And so I really had this just built-in loyalty and this sense of family, and it just and that's also, I think, well, what's interesting is I'm not sure it is my nature. I was so conditioned from the
Right.
get-go that now I'm thinking, what if I'm actually a monster and I just haven't tapped into the fun yet?
There's always time.
I know, I know,
You can
I
write the
know.
new story of the monster.
A
Anyway, go.
year of being a real so
I think we're gonna have to cut that out.
oh,
Anyhow,
sorry.
don't worry.
Oh boy.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so
So your Gail, your M word person,
yeah.
when she died, there was a
Right.
whole different trust, a whole different will. Am
Right.
I
So when we
saying?
were small, we were always signing contracts and saw all the Musketeer movies, and it was just, we were just this entity that just, we were this insular thing, that the world was unsafe. We were together, all of us, one for all for one. And so we were just always taught we were just gonna always,
Be together,
yeah,
right?
be together. And so Gail, when she died, she essentially left all of the intellectual property to my two siblings, my two baby siblings, and cut Dweezil and I out from ever having any say in how to preserve my father's legacy. She also did an unequal distribution of whatever. That part is, that's a whole other story. But and then she also put in the in the will that if anyone finds God, they get nothing. And and
Wow.
and what was wild was, I was basically raised with my nanny was a Ouija board. So and again, she built this. You shouldn't know who Aleister Crowley is at 5 years old. And so
Yeah, no.
there's
Yeah.
all this, eh, really woo-woo stuff on her end. And in the book, I reflect back and I think, wow, did my father even know that that was what was happening in the house? I just assumed he was on board with it, but actually a lot of that stuff happened when he was away on tour for 9 months out of the year. And
Well,
so
I was going to
it's,
say, it doesn't sound like your dad would have had an idea because it sounds like Gail was the CEO of all things
yeah.
Zappa-esque,
Right, right,
right?
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was that made me have to take a second look. uh, I was like, I need a redo. I just got to see what this whole thing is, and I had to think about what family is, what trust is, what loyalty is, what promises are, on and on. So it just really, it threw me for a loop because I knew that Gail and I were not naturally compatible. That's the nice way of saying it. And I had really made peace with it because of all the yoga. I had a namaste,
Right.
I'm disappointed too feeling. And when this happened, I thought, wow,
Right.
we had a we had a totally different understanding where we had landed. So,
Well, that's what's so interesting to me about memoir. Full disclosure, I've written a couple of my own and I teach memoir. Um,
oh,
and one of the things that I always say is that memoir is the story your memory tells you. And so
mm,
when you go back into your story, you really, it's like doing brain surgery on yourself without
hmm.
anesthesia.
Yeah, it's true because there are the events that happen, and then there's what you told yourself about those events,
Exactly.
and that is such a fascinating psychological journey because I had and have internalized the very worst of her voice, and so it's not just what she did, it's then what I then
Responded, right.
yeah, and how I've it's to free yourself from the prison in your head. Gail used to say words make sentences in this ominous like dun dun way where and they can be sentences.
Right.
Dun dun. And so and I just thought, okay, Gail. Uh she was really she would craft words as spells. I mean, her she spent a lot of time crafting clever sentences and circumstances.
That is so interesting. Speaking of sentences, you have some beautiful sentences in your work. In fact, it just flows with this kind of intimacy as if you're sitting across the kitchen table from somebody.
Thank you.
Yeah, tell me about your writing life. When did writing become the artistic way that you expressed yourself and what influences did you have in that process?
Yeah, so I grew up writing, keeping journals, drawing, writing, just taking notes about what I'm seeing, going, this doesn't seem right. I don't like this. I'm sad. Uh, and I wanted to be an actress like Cher, like Carol Burnett. I love those variety style
Yeah,
shows and those little vignettes, these little moments. They were, little mini stories that little tiny plays. And um, then I I got a few acting roles after the Valley Girl thing, which and again, this was I was so desperate for my father's attention because when he
yeah.
shined his light on you, you felt like you were the only person in the room. And competing for that time with him, it wasn't just my family
It
competing, it
was the
was
world.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So I I wanted to work with him. I slipped a note under his studio door because I figured out the secret formula was he loves working, so that's how you're going to spend time with him. And so he took me up on the offer on a school night. He woke me up. He said, "Do that funny voice that you do," because I was going to school in the valley, and the girls just had this lovely lyrical cadence that just was hilarious to me. And so recorded a few tracks, and then that led to some acting things. And then I got into class to study acting because I really was thinking, okay, I want to have craft here. And one teacher in particular, uh, Roy London, was just this an unbelievable teacher. And oops, sorry about that. I got to turn my focus thing on. And he really he saw me journaling and in the class just taking feverish notes. And I and he said he just turned and he said, "Moon, you're a writer." And
Oh,
it hadn't really. I mean, I was always writing, but it just didn't occur to me to write. But because I wasn't getting acting roles, I thought, oh, I'll just write something for myself. It must be easier to have a career writing your own.
uh-huh.
So I went down that journey and ha 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 ha. And then that led to some journalism. I was interviewing musicians for a magazine called Ray Gun,
Yes,
and
Reagan. We both wrote for Reagan at the same time too. So, you
and
know,
that
yet another.
that's so funny. It's we're destined to know one
Yes,
another.
we are in fact. Anyway, Speaking of Valley Girl, a
Yeah.
couple things there. One is I heard in another interview, you actually forgot in your first draft to mention anything about the most iconic
Yeah.
Zappa song that is known in popular consciousness. How did
That's
that?
right. I it I had a real blind spot about this time in my life, and I'm not even joking. It's hilarious. I literally turned in my memoir with no mention of Valley Girl. And and so obviously they said, you're missing a couple of stories.
Little thing.
And I was taken aback. And then it was some of the last pieces that I wrote, because I just didn't realize how much energy, uh, discomfort, pain was around that particular time. And
Mm.
I guess I just wasn't ready to really roll my sleeves up and look at that. So that took a minute.
All right, I want to ask you another question about that, but before that, I want to ask, let's go back to Gail for a minute because she is truly the antagonist for me of this work, but she's also tragic.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
found that she was very tragic in her circumstance. She's in this marriage with 4 kids with a husband who is overtly not faithful in any sense. Um, and so she's trying to get control in the ways that she can get control, and it becomes very toxic for certainly you and for all of her children, really. Did anything shift for you around that relationship with your mother and writing about her?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, I saw her as a tragic figure growing up. I thought she's suffering so much privately, and then putting on a happy face, a Zen face in the world. And she this is a house of, you know, you could say the F word as much as you want, but feelings, failings, and family, we just didn't come together in those ways that you'd see on television or in movies or you'd read about and I'd fantasize about. And so that is how I was able to always have compassion and empathy for her, because I just thought she's not been dealt a great hand, and she keeps choosing it. And you know, I was wishing they'd get a divorce growing up, um, but I would compartmentalize and honestly dissociate from my own experiences, because I just wanted her to not be suffering. So it was just scrambling to get her to a good state so that then she could function well as a mom. And and so and like I said, I had come to a kind of a peace with that, and I would go to therapy, and I would tell some of the stories, and I'd say, how can I create some harmony here? And they'd say, run for your life. This person is a monster. And I'd say, oh no, no, I must have told it wrong, favoring myself and not saying what I did, not saying my part. And I, tell it again, and they'd say, run for your life.
Don't write.
And I would say, no, no. And then I go find another therapist, because I thought they don't know, they're not skilled enough to tell me how to stay in connection with this person, and who keeps hammering me.
Right.
And it just, I just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, now after having written the book and really, when someone's editing out all the parts where you're doing the self-blaming, and you just have the events just unadorned like a
Right.
police report. You're like, wait a second, maybe it wasn't all me,
Right.
maybe.
I call it the deposition of your life, right?
Right, right.
Just reading the deposition, like, oh wow, okay, I have perspective now. I
Yeah,
always,
so fresh empathy came, and also fresh anger.
yeah, I can see that. Well, I always say to my students, you need 5 things to write a memoir. You need a priest, a rabbi, a best friend, a 12-step meeting, and a therapist.
I know. And that's what I said. I said, I wish somebody would have said, just get in a 12-step program and work a fourth step, because before you decide to write a memoir, because it is so much, it really is true. Like the way out is through. and you're just it's like in Silence of the Lambs, you're just swinging in the dark. You're just like, how do I get out of here? You can't see land. I mean, I could on and on with the metaphors about what that experience is like. And yet, if you stay with it, you don't die from it, then you'll have something on the other side of it that is for you first of all.
First and foremost, but for others too. One of the things about your work and one of the things about any great memoir is that it's also an ethnography. It's also a witness to a place and time. And there's something about Laurel Canyon. There was something about the 80s. And there's something about, just listen, I told you about the trailer in New Mexico that I grew up in. Couldn't be farther from Laurel Canyon, couldn't be farther from the celebrity studied neighbors that you grew up with. But yet that Gen X parents were doing something else and we were raising ourselves like wolves, that resonated. How much of that were you conscious of as you were writing, that you were also writing about a place and time and a generation?
Oh, I mean, that was the fun. That was the part where I was looking forward to. I was like, uh I love when stories take you to a world, obviously. And then so setting it in, getting to revisit those experiences, and honestly treating it like I was writing science fiction and saying, okay, well, if you didn't grow up there, what things can I put in there so somebody can access it? And if you
Right.
did grow up in those times, what can I put in there that spark, oh, right, that thing, and to kind of create that, yeah, just that double thing of a memory, but also of engagement somehow. And yeah, so yeah, those are my favorite kinds of stories, when you get dropped into a world and you just,
Oh,
if you feel like you're in a diving suit and you're just like,
right.
whoa.
Oh, right. The 3D, the virtual 3D, you get to
Hmm.
sit in your imagination.
But the other thing too I want to mention is, which I didn't talk about in the book, but I really do feel like the rock stars had parents that were either military or extremely rigid. Then it goes rock star, and then all the kids of the rock stars are woo woo as F. And it's this weird thing. And so I don't know what comes next with our
I
children, but
was just gonna,
there does seem to be this weird. I
that
mean, that's
is
that's a generalization, but yeah.
you just gave me the perfect segue for my next second to last question, and that is about what kind of a document this is for your own kids. Do you hope they read it? Do they you probably have no interest in it whatsoever at this point in
Right. And
time?
who cares about your parents' stuff? It's silly. But but I think that yeah, so you make something just in case they're interested, but I think the to create something that um I don't know. For me, books, movies, uh, music, these dance, these things saved my life when I was going through a difficult time. And somebody would say something that was like a skeleton key, or they would
Yeah,
show something that I was like, oh, you could live like that. And so for me, it wasn't just to heal myself, but also to say, if I have privilege and access to help, what is somebody else going through that doesn't have that? And can I give something to you that helps you language it better so that you can free yourself sooner?
I love that.
Is-
Thank you. That's great. I love that. Yeah, because it's an act of service ultimately to tell our
Mhm,
final question. You're going on a book tour, right? Aren't you
mhm.
about to launch yourself on a book tour? How
Yeah.
are you preparing for that
Oh
mentally?
my God. Uh, I know each phase has its own weirdness. I have not been in the public's eye for so long, and it's not something that I seek out. I'm horrible at social media, all the things you're supposed to be doing to get the word out. But I think that I'm most excited about having people read the book and then hearing how it lands with them. Of course, that's the dream, is that somebody benefits from it. So I'm looking forward to that, because in some, when you go on the book tour at first, very often the book hasn't come out and they
Right.
haven't read it yet, so they're coming to hear you, but they don't have the experience of having read it and then asking questions. So it'll be fun as it progresses, so that there's more opportunities for people to have read it and then come to the readings.
Well, I wish you the best. I hope to catch you live in one of your local events.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Moon. Really, truly.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry I dropped the C word. I'm so sorry.
Oh, God, don't even.
Thank you so much.
If this wasn't a newspaper company, we would be effing and seeing all day long. Anyway,
Sorry, the Zappa thing is strong.
it's strong. The force is strong with this one. Anyway, thanks so much again. And yeah, I hope to catch you in another
Yeah,
context.
yeah, it'd be wonderful. Thank you so
Thanks
much. Thank you.
again.
Mwah.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, isn't she the best? Didn't you guys have a great time listening to her? I sure had a great time talking to her. I have to say, there's a question that's come in, and I want to answer it before we move on to our next guest. D. Zobel says, I know a little 6-year-old chap who often finds his parents dreadfully out of touch with him, as we all do, and wants to write a book for adults, telling them all the things they've obviously forgotten about what's important to kids. Would you advise, I assume that's me, D, advise him go for it while it's fresh or wait until he's acquired more life experience? I always say, write, 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 write. Who knows what you're going to do with it, but the process of writing is going to be illuminating no matter what the case. So tell that kid to write. And all of you too, write. Let's move on to our next guest. We've got a lot to cover. I met him years ago when I myself was a writer in residence at the New York State Summer Writers Institute, and he was just a 19-year-old poet taking classes. But today, Garth Greenwell can only be described as a sensation in the literary world, the world of literary fiction, I should say. Garth's first novel, What Belongs to You, in 2016, established the 46-year-old Iowa resident as a force in contemporary American literature. That book won the British Book Award for Debut of the Year, was longlisted for the National Book Award, and was a finalist for other major laurels, including the PEN/Faulkner Award. Plus, it was named a Best Book of the Year by more than 50 publications across 9 countries. His second work, Cleanness, also garnered a lot of critical praise. That was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award, and it was cited as a top book of the year by lots of outlets, including the New York Times, the New Yorker, Time, NPR, and the BBC. Garth joined me earlier last week to talk about his newest novel, Small Rain. We've got it coming up here in just a minute. Welcome, Garth Greenwell. Garth, it's so great to see your handsome face.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here, Sam.
Well, Small Rain, I haven't been able to put down. I got into my hot little hands. It's what I call a big story in a very small space. The protagonist we begin with is in extreme pain. He goes into the hospital, finds out that there is a life-threatening illness, and then it is the movement of his consciousness through this experience. I understand that you yourself went through a medical emergency. Can you talk a little bit about the origins of this book in relation to that experience?
Yeah, so, the book is not memoir autobiography, but it is the case that I find what makes me want to write a book is feeling utterly bewildered by something that I have witnessed or something that has happened to me. And I did have a medical crisis like the narrators in the summer of 2020. And I wasn't in the hospital as long as he was, but after spending, I think, about 8 days in the ICU, I just felt like something had happened to me that I couldn't understand. And it's that feeling that makes me feel like I need to write a book.
Well, it's that vulnerability that I think I connected to very profoundly in this story. I think anyone who's been in the hospital knows that sense of losing their personal agency, right?
Yeah, that's right. And, that was one of the things I wanted to explore because weirdly, even though, being ill is such a sort of central and profound human experience, I actually think it's kind of underreported in literature. Virginia Woolf wrote a famous essay on being ill in which she sort of noticed the same thing. Like, why isn't this in books? Because it's a fascinating experience,
Right.
to sort of find oneself as a patient and sort of be embedded in the bureaucracy and the scheduling of a hospital, and also just having to sort of allow oneself to be cared for by others.
Yes.
That was something I wanted to try to capture what that feels like.
Well, you did it brilliantly. And also in the very intimate details of being in the hospital, I found that it was just by stating the condition of what that was, it was almost an implicit condemnation of the American medical system, right? Our healthcare system. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, not just sort of in the sort of general dysfunction, but the book also takes place, in one of the sort of cresting waves of the COVID pandemic,
Right.
pre-vaccines. And so it's a system that is really flawed to begin with, and then is under an awful lot of stress. And, just to begin with, I mean, he waits, he goes in, and what they think he has is acute appendicitis, which is a potentially life-threatening condition. He sits in the
Exactly.
waiting room for 6 hours
Right.
before they finally do a CT scan and find out, oh no, actually, there's something much worse going on.
Right. Yes. And one of the things that I loved so much in that early section where he's waiting for the 6 hours is that the drudgery of it, and also the witnessing of other people's pain and frustration and suffering.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that was very moving to me, because also, because of COVID restrictions, they were being very strict about who could come into the ER. And basically, if you could walk, you had to come in alone.
Right.
And, seeing all of these people, all of them in this condition of, fear. You don't go to the ER because things are going well, I mean, something's wrong, and to find them alone. And so, yeah, I wanted to try to put that on the page, just the sort of poignancy, and also the experience of sort of seeing people be kind to each other, seeing the kind of like little community that forms as people wait for hours and hours and hours to figure out what's wrong with them.
Right, right. It's almost like the brotherhood in the foxholes in war. You're bonded by the trauma of that immediate experience.
That's right.
One of the things I love so much about your writing in general, and this book in particular, is that there's the container of the story, the situation, which is the hospital and the life-threatening illness. But really, the plot is the movement of consciousness. In this book, we go everywhere. We have we have a PhD on poetry. We learn about opera. We have that movement of I love that. And it's also a meditation on relationship, right?
Yeah.
And love and long-term relationship. Because it is so wide-ranging, it is the experience of reading it is actually seamless. I'm wondering, how do you do what you do, Garth Greenwell? Is it discovered in the editing process? What is the process of wrangling that stream of consciousness?
So I mean, writing for me really is a process of discovery. I don't know what the next sentence is going to be until I write it. And really, sentences are for me, they're not containers for thought, they're tools for thinking. And when I feel like I'm writing well, I feel like I'm being surprised, I'm making discoveries. In some way, this is a book about a guy who, for almost the entire book, never leaves his bed. Like, that's one way to think about what the book is about.
Right. I thought of Marcel Proust,
Yeah, like it takes him, 80 pages to turn over.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's a book about, a guy who's in his early 40s. He's always been healthy. He has had no reason to think that he's going to have to confront his own mortality in this sort of really imminent way.
Right.
And he goes into the emergency room, and when they finally admit him, after 6 hours of waiting, one of the first things he hears a surgeon tell him, "You could die from this."
Yes.
And so, this is a book about somebody confronting, decades before he thought he would have to, this question of, if this is it, what has my life been worth? And so really, it's a book about his whole life. And it's a book about what that life is made of, and what it's made of is art. He's a poet, he's dedicated his life to art, but also the little Midwestern town where it turns out he has made his life, the house he has bought with his partner, and above which has been a disaster.
And I was going to say, and the metaphor for that, right?
Absolutely, this other sort of body collapsing or falling
Yes,
apart
the
house,
house
and then
itself.
the house itself. And then more than anything else, it is this partnership. He's 7 years into a long-term relationship, which is something he had never imagined for himself.
Right.
And, thinking about really realizing maybe for the first time how his life is built around this profound experience of love, and being in the hospital. Again, because of COVID, his partner can only visit him for like an hour a day. And just this intense, he realizes the extent to which his life really has become something bound up with this other person.
That thank you, author, for giving us the most eloquent rundown of what this book is about. It is truly, truly beautiful. And it was moving in almost every part of it. There was some page that I had to stop and underline a sentence or reread to appreciate the emotion. One of the things I want to ask you about is this idea, and I know that this is odious to you because people ask about memoir versus fiction all the time. But I do think but I always love your response to it. And what is that difference for you? What is the failure of memoir, I guess, and how does fiction allow you to tell a greater truth?
Well, I wouldn't put it in those terms. I don't think there is a failure of memoir. I think there are great books that are memoirs. And I think, memoir is 100% art. I don't think memoirs are lesser than novels. I think that for me, for the particular tools I have for my sensibility, I need the tools of fiction. I need to be able to invent. I need to be able to be very free. I treat the material of my life, because this book, it's not a transcription. All
Right.
sorts of things are made up. There's a major character who is this nurse named Olivia who takes care of the narrator, like his primary caregiver.
Yes.
That is totally unrealistic. No single nurse would spend so many days with him.
Yes.
But in all of these ways, it's made up. And I really do feel, I remember with my very first book, sort of this British.
What belongs to you, your first novel?
Thank you for reminding me to say the title. What belongs to you?
Just for folks who might not know, those few people who might not know, what belongs to you in your second novel?
Well, thank you for that. So I remember the first big interview I did, this British interviewer asking me about how much of this is real. And I sort of gave my typical answer, and then she sort of stopped. She said, she's about really, just tell us. But I'm actually so baffled by that question, because you know what it's like. It's like, like oil paints are made with flaxseed oil.
Right.
It's like pointing at an oil painting in a museum and saying how much of that is flax. The sort of reality, lived experience has been pulverized. It has become a medium. So if someone points to a page and says how much of this is true, there's no way for me to answer that question, And but that's not, I really don't want to set up a hierarchy between nonfiction and fiction. It's just that for my sensibility, there are things, situations that are so complex, so difficult to think about, that they defeat all of my other tools for thinking. And that's when I need art. And what I mean is I need the pressure of scene. I need the pressure of syntax. I need the pressure of sort of patterns of imagery. I need all of these resources of language that are not just about what something is saying or what the words mean, but instead about how language can affect our senses. You use an image and the nonverbal parts of your brain associated with sight or with smell light up, So that aesthetic use of language is what I need to sort of understand my world, you know.
I love this. And I recalls the fact that when I first met you, you were a poet only. You hadn't begun to be a novelist. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing that that informs your entire view. That's the lens through which you see things still.
Yeah, that's really true. You know, I mean, all of my literary education was in poetry. As you know, where we met at the New York State Summer Writers Institute, I was able to work with really, I think, sort of the great poets of our time, people like Frank Bedard and Carolyn Forche. And it really is still the tools of poetry that I bring to writing a novel, just because they're the tools that I have, you know. I mean, when I wrote my first book, I had never taken a fiction workshop. I had never thought about fiction as a writer. I really approached it with, well, with the tools of poetry. And then also my first education in art, as you know, was
Was
yeah.
opera. That was exactly my next point, right? The storytelling of opera, right, was ingrained in you.
That's
Um,
really true. I mean, and I think my first experience of sort of like the power of narrative was going to Kentucky Opera in Louisville when I was 14 years old, you know.
Kentucky Opera, you heard it here, folks.
It was
Don't think so.
good. It was good. It was a good company. And I remember the second opera I saw was an opera by Benjamin Britten, an adaptation, who is still my favorite composer, an adaptation of Turn of the Screw by Henry James, who is now the most important writer for me. Like that
Yeah,
really just like set my artistic compass
artistic.
and experience.
I love that. Speaking, well, I told you I wouldn't keep you long, so I won't keep you long. But since we're speaking of opera, one final question is, I hear that one of your book, What Belongs to You, is actually going to be made into an opera. Can you talk a little bit about that? That must be an incredible feeling for you.
It's amazing. I'm so excited about it. Yes, so it's actually premiering next month, in September. It's in Richmond at the Maudlin Center at the University of Richmond. And it has been the most wonderful experience because it has you know, the team that is making it are almost all people that I have known since I was 18 years old. So it's being performed by the ensemble Alarm Will Sound, which is conducted by Alan Pearson, who has been my best friend since freshman year at the Eastman School of Music. It's
Okay.
being sung by an extraordinary tenor, Kareem Suleiman, who was a student with me at Eastman. We had the same voice teacher. We were in the same studio. 3 years ago, he won the Grammy for best solo classical performance. So he has had
That is
just an
incredible.
extraordinary career. And the composer, an extraordinary composer named David T. Little, who entered into the book with the most incredible sympathy. You know, the music is, I really think he has made a major work. The music is just gorgeous. It feels like my book has been illuminated and sort of delivered to me anew. And then the new piece, which I actually haven't seen yet because he's famously very protective of rehearsals, but the opera is being staged, being directed by the iconic, legendary dancer and choreographer Mark Morris. And so
Oh
I
my
will
gosh.
see, it's incredible. So I will see the staging for the first time at the University of Richmond. And actually, Mark Morris, when I was a student in St. Louis, when I was about 21, I, not knowing anything about dance, a friend invited me to the Mark Morris Dance Company, and it was one of his last performances in which he danced.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was just, again, this moment that just like set one of the points of my aesthetic compass. So it just feels like this extraordinary stroke of good fortune, and I'm so excited about it.
It's kind of a coming home, isn't it? On in so many levels.
It
That's
really, sort of my artistic life coming full
yes,
circle. Yeah.
that's amazing. And you're only 21 still. My mind. My mind. Listen,
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
I
Bless
love
you
you.
for that.
I love you and congratulations on Small Rain and all of your artistic successes. Please come back
Thank
to
you.
us.
With joy. Thank you, Sam.
I just realized I'm wearing the same thing that I was wearing when I interviewed him. Coincidence? I think not. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, everybody. I want to answer a quick question in the Q&A. Someone asked, talking of oil painting, some artists can't stop working on a painting until someone else comes along and takes the brush away. Given that a fiction author can always talk himself into adding just a little bit more, How do you cope with that internal voice that chirps, maybe it's not done yet? Here's the answer. No piece of writing is ever finished. It's only abandoned. Sometimes you just have to abandon your children. You just have to abandon that piece of work. I'm kidding about the children. Anyway, listen, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight. It was enjoyable for me, and please join us again. I have to thank, of course, Moon and Garth for joining us, even though they had to record, they couldn't be live. It was wonderful. Also, thanks to our production manager, Julie Corlett, the Oz behind the curtain, who makes everything happen, especially tonight. So thank you, Julie. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Bookish will be back next month with another lineup of great authors. We've got Stuart Neville and Josh Moore, two scary guys in time for Halloween in October. Meanwhile, if you've missed past episodes, catch up on our virtual programs at scng.com/virtual events. And you can also register for our other upcoming virtual programs, as you see there, Right Size and Garden Party. If you'd like to share your thoughts from today, or if you have additional questions, please email us at events@scng.com. Or if you want to give me suggestions directly on the show, or just complain or do whatever, just talk to me. Reach me at sdunn@scng.com. And remember, you can always find great book coverage in our newspapers every day online at all of our news sites. Have a great time tonight, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye. Happy reading, everybody.